Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing A Storm Is Coming by Bjørn Riis.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So oftentimes I really like making the joke of, yeah, there's gonna be favorite bits now and then there's none, and I do something like I take a book, I don't have a book, I'm gonna use this as a book, and I'm reading the book and I'm like, oh wow, you came back, wow, that's amazing. But no, I'm not gonna do it this time. I don't have any favorite bits from this album, so I guess we can move on to the review itself. So this is Bjørn Riis's third studio solo album. Now the reason I find it important to say that it's his solo album is because apparently Bjørn Riis is mostly known for being a part of the Norwegian band Airbag. And Bjørn Riis went on his solo career with the proper knowledge of how to create a full-on album, seeing as he is a multi-instrumentalist who can play the guitar, the bass, the keyboards, and of course he also does the vocals. He basically features a one-man show on here with barely any contributors. Now, to anyone who's listened to enough prog rock albums by bands and solo artists alike, you might get the trend so far that usually prog rock albums by bands sound more richer than those with solo albums. And the instances where solo albums actually sound really rich with their sound is usually when there's a lot of contributors on them. So take for example an album that we reviewed recently on here, like Riis's Choir Fish Out of Water, or basically any of the David Gilmour albums. But in today's album, Bjørn Riis goes basically full on solo mode, and really besides the drums he does everything by himself. Now as much as I wanted him to defy expectations and actually have a very rich and big and overarching and somewhat omnipotent sound on this album, I was kind of disappointed by discovering that this album feels very much lacking. Now time and time again I am so surprised to see how people and bands alike are able to create such long progressive songs which in actuality are just really stale long pieces. Like almost all of the songs on this album are at least 7 minutes in length, but most of them are very repetitive, very disinteresting, and honestly I really didn't enjoy any of them. And realistically thinking about it, I think that it's a really hard task of creating long songs that are genuinely disinteresting. Like I'm just trying to think to myself, you create something that's so repetitive, it's so stale, it might vary in energies at some points, but honestly it really doesn't matter all that much, and then you sit down to yourself and think, yeah, you know what, this is really good, and I just don't get it. And yes, I know that music is subjective, but I just can't really see myself or any other person thinking that this album is a perfect album with perfect songs. I really can't even see how Bjørn himself thinks that this is a perfect album. Wow, I'm being real harsh on this album. I'm really sorry, I just really didn't like what it does, and especially I didn't like the song Stormwatch, which I believe is the first song in like a month which I've given a rating of 3 out of 10. And unfortunately this album is really uninspiring. It has like mediocre songs, but as a whole I would even say that this album is mediocre minus, but because I'm sort of contractually obligated to tell you what my favorite song on here, I'd have to tell you that it's the first song of When Rain Falls. It has the most potential in it, it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's fine I guess, and it's pretty heavy prog, which is pretty fine, but it all goes downhill from there, and it goes quite down. Now I don't know any of the other Bjørn Riis solo albums, as well I don't know anything by Airbag themselves. They might create great music, but in all honesty I don't really think after listening to this one that they have created something that's really perfect and so fun to listen to, and it just reinforces my idea that Norwegian prog is just a lesser brother to Swedish prog. That if you've heard my opinions about Swedish artists and bands in the past, you'd know that I really like what they do prog-wise. But who knows, maybe when you combine Bjørn Riis with the entirety of the Airbag band, then maybe everyone injecting their own ideas creates something that's bigger than the sum of its parts. I don't really know, I guess I'll have to listen to at least one of their albums albums, so if anyone watching this video wants to recommend me an Airbag album, I'd love to hear what you have to say. But if you thought the bashing for this album on the review itself was bad, just wait to see what I think about this cover. So when I made the intro for the series, I remember seeing this cover distinctly, although not really focusing on it too much, and thinking that it's pretty nice. And I know that there is, some sort of sexual hints on it, or maybe more than hints. You can see it over here, you know what it has to do with anything. But I myself am not really bothered by that. I love my Scorpions cover as much as anyone, but there's one thing on this cover that really broke the camel's back, and I really despise this cover for it, and if you have already guessed by now, it's a certain liquid found on here. Now, I don't want to be too direct with it, but as you can see, there are two drops coming out of a certain area in this cover, which to me at least took a very tasteful cover that looks pretty nice in the boundaries of what's okay to show and what's not okay to show, and it just made it pretty distasteful. And yes, you can argue that these drops, they symbolize the rain that's a motive on this album, but in my personal opinion, there's really no way that it was just placed like that. There's something that really makes this lovely cover of, a nude subject into something that's really overly sexual and really not my kind of thing. And if I had to summarize this cover right now, I'd say that it's really uncomfortable in some way. It might just be me, I might be overlooking this one too badly, but in my personal opinion, they just could have left it without those two drops and this cover would be very, very fine. So I'm having a pretty hard time in choosing what the rating for this album actually is. I don't know whether it's a 4 or 5 because honestly I can objectively see it as being just mediocre, but there is some sort of subjectivity that tells me that this album is pretty bad, so I guess I'll just make the decision right here on the spot. I think that this album gets a 4 out of 10. But that's about it guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Concerto Grosso per I Neutrals by Neutrals. I hope I said that correctly, I actually have no idea, it's in Italian. Neutrals are an Italian progressive band, which I'm really looking forward to hear what they have in store for us, but until then, we'll see what happens with it tomorrow. I of course want to thank my lovely supporter over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Walnum, you are the best. And if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it guys, have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.